What sign or opening line has led to the best conversations in your outreach? Any advice on living with a vegetarian partner, when to push, when to let things go? What's the best way to deal with people who say your phone was made by children and the screen has animal products in it as an argument against veganism? What's up everybody, Natalie here, and today we're doing a Q&A video. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We're gonna be talking a lot about how to navigate social situations, living with non-vegan partners, crazy arguments I've heard during street outreach, and more. So let's get right into it with the first question. Do you still have non-vegan items from the time before you went vegan? If yes, what is it and how is your relationship with it? Yes, I do. I'll be right back. All right, guys, you've probably seen her before, but you may not know much about her. This is Cassandra, and you know, she's been in a lot of my videos, but what you probably don't know is that she's actually made out of human leather. Not just any human leather, but I actually murdered my neighbor a few years ago because I heard that if you commit a crime locally, it's a lot better than committing it in a different city. So murdering your neighbor is fine because it's local, but murdering someone in a different state would obviously be terrible. So yes, this is Cassandra. She's human leather from my neighbor, and I will cherish her every single day, whether I'm vegan or not. All right, obviously I'm kidding. When it comes to non-vegan items that I have, I personally don't have any anymore. Before I went vegan, I had a pair of leather boots and a down coat. It was actually turbo down, so I thought that meant that it didn't actually have down, but it turns out it's like a mixture. So what did I do with them? I gave the boots to my sister, and I donated the jacket to Hurricane Ida victims. So if you still have some non-vegan items, personally, I don't think you should keep them. I like to run the human leather tests, so I was thinking like, okay, I can use these leather boots. I like them. They're good quality. They're going to last forever. But what if I found out they were made from human skin and that human was murdered? Would I still want these boots? The answer for me was no, so I got rid of them. And the other thing that you could do that I've heard that one of my patrons gave me this idea was to actually sell the non-vegan item and then donate that money to a sanctuary. I think that's good. The only problem with that is that you're further commodifying the animal, which what we want to do is create a society where animals are not seen as commodities. So that's why I kind of like to keep any financial element out of it. But if you are going to sell it, then donating that money is a way to help animals, and I think that's great. I don't think you should necessarily keep these items because, if people see you wearing them, you're perpetuating it. If it's something that's really important to you, you got to ask, like, do you want something that came from a tortured animal to be that important to you? Probably not. So my advice would be to get rid of it if at all possible. If it's like your coat and your only coat and you're going to freeze to death, then obviously my advice to you would be different. But in general, I think we should make it a habit of getting rid of our non-vegan items. I've been vegan for 1 year. I'm still struggling to find the right position in casual situations with friends. It's hard to not shout "meat is murder" in their faces the whole time, but also the fact that they can't see it is hard to comprehend. Do you have any advice? I know exactly what you need. I'll be right back. All right, can y'all see this? My meat is murder shirt. So if you can't yell it at your friends, remember that you can always wear a shirt that has a vegan message. So that's a great thing to do. But in all seriousness, there are a lot of different ways that you can navigate the situation. And obviously it depends on what situation you're in and who you're with. Now, you said it was a casual situation with friends. If someone's talking about something they cooked the other night, like if they made chicken soup, then you can say, oh my God, that's crazy. I actually made the best kitten soup. It was so good. I love eating cats. The only thing that would have made it better was to throw in a few puppies. Now, that's a great kind of sarcastic way to deal with it. Other things, one thing that my fiance did that I thought was great is one of my friends mentioned going to Toop's Meadery. It's a gross restaurant around here. And he just went like, and mimed throwing up. You want to essentially become known as the person who doesn't like people talking about animal products in front of you. In terms of why they can't make the connection, just remember that you didn't make the connection for years. You've only been vegan a year. And honestly, the first year is sometimes the hardest. So always try to empathize and remember that some of your friends are never going to get it. They're never going to go vegan. They're never going to care. So it's something you either have to come to terms with or make new friends. I personally like having non-vegan friends because I can kind of get out of my head and not necessarily think about veganism all the time, but I also try to set boundaries so that they're not constantly talking about animal products. And someone else asked something similar to this, so I'm going to talk a bit more about setting boundaries when I answer his question. What's the best way to deal with people who say your phone was made by children and the screen has animal products in it as an argument against veganism? Just tell them that using children as slaves has been done for thousands of years and they're really hard workers and they should be used as slaves. So, it's natural. We've been doing it forever. So there's no problem with your phone being made by child slaves. All right, I'm kidding, and probably don't say that. When someone is saying this to you, first of all, realize that they're probably not going to go vegan. They don't care about going vegan. They care about making you look like a hypocrite. So you want to deal with this. It's kind of like a mix of ad hominem, whataboutism, appeal to futility. There's a lot of logical fallacies going into this one objection. So I think dealing with as many as you can is a good way to go about it. So what I like to do is say, vegans aren't perfect. None of us think that we're perfect. We're all going to create some harm in this world. But the best thing we can do is try to minimize that harm. It's about reducing suffering, not being perfect. That's a great kind of opening line to take yourself down a peg, to make them know that you're not trying to be morally superior or whatever, and just kind of put yourself back at an even playing field. So that's a great thing to do. And the other thing you want to do is to tie it back to animal abuse. So let's say, for example, I was beating a dog and you saw me beating that dog and you asked me to stop and I said, but you have a cell phone. Do you think that would be a good argument against me beating a dog? Usually they'll say no, or okay, that makes sense. Then you go on to say, when we're choosing what cell phones to buy, we basically only have a couple options, and we don't know if one was caused by animal abuse and one wasn't. If there were two cell phone choices and I could choose one that I knew for a fact did not cause any harm to animals or humans, I would absolutely choose that one. But that's not the situation that we're in. However, every time you go to the grocery store, that is the situation you're in. You have the plant-based beef or the beef. You know for a fact that cow meat has caused abuse to an animal. They have suffered. They have died for it. And you know that the plant-based meat has not done that. So in that situation, which would it be more moral to choose? So essentially what you want to do is deal with the hypocrisy, the appeal to futility, and then tie it back to animal abuse. And this is also a good cue to start ending the conversation if you feel like someone is just wasting your time, because that's probably what they're doing at the end of the day. Any advice on living with a vegetarian partner, when to push, when to let things go? So I have not personally been in this situation. My partner went vegan about a month after I did. I don't remember pushing that hard. I know I mentioned to watch Dominion a lot. I was playing a lot of Earthly Guide and Street Outreach videos on our TV. One day I woke up and he said he had watched Dominion and was going vegan, which was awesome. But luckily, since I don't want to leave you without an answer, I am going to call my friend Dane because she was in this situation. So let's see how she handled it.
My approach to this was basically, I was an academic at the time, getting my master's and PhD, focusing on critical animal studies. So whenever we would talk about my work, it was just very fact-based. Like, this is what happens. Here's my philosophical position on it. So I kept the conversations very philosophical and fact-based and never told him, you need to do this. The closest I got to that was when he would say something like, oh, well, I don't believe in that. And I'd be like, oh, but, you do support it. And he'd be, he'd take a moment and be like, oh, yeah, I do, don't I?
Oh, wow. That's pretty direct.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't accusatory
or
anything. And it wasn't like, you need to do this. It was just, there's a cognitive dissonance there. I wouldn't be afraid to point that out.
He went vegetarian after a year, and then a couple months after that, he went vegan.
Actually, for him to be completely vegan, never eating that, it was a couple years.
Okay. I heard a few people saying that animals only eat stuff that we don't, like husks and grass, so it's not like we are wasting edible foods on livestock animals. What's the best way to count that? Sure, this is something that people say all the time, and first of all, it's not true. We're using a lot of crops that humans could eat, from corn to wheat to soybean meal. Apparently humans actually could eat soybean meal, but that's usually the one that they're talking about. But I think the crux of the issue is not about the food that we're feeding to them, but the land that we're growing that food on. So for example, most cows are fed a mixture of grass, hay, alfalfa. You have to grow that hay and alfalfa, and that land could be used to grow something that humans could actually eat. So it's not just about the crops that we're feeding them, it's about what we can be doing with that land instead. In addition, we don't have to use all of it for farmland. If we got rid of animal agriculture, we could reduce farmland by up to 75%. That comes from the Joseph Poor study. Just mention to them that it doesn't even matter what percentage of food the animals are eating that's inedible, because we could repurpose that land to grow food for humans or to re-wild that land and get more oxygen and help climate change. How you respond to people's excitement over non-vegan food, it makes me feel some type of way to see their excitement directly linked to animal cruelty, making it hard to navigate, but usually I ignore it and feel weird. Yeah, this is a situation that I am in a lot because I work at a half-vegan restaurant, and like when people come up and they're like, oh my god, that food was so good, and they got the non-vegan stuff, it kind of puts me in an awkward position because I usually just don't even say anything. I'm just like, oh, or like I ignore them. So you mentioned that you typically ignore these comments and you don't like doing that because it makes you feel some type of way. Totally valid. I think that since you were doing that and it is not working, obviously you need to change tactics. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that we're going to talk a bit more about setting boundaries in relationships. So this is what I'm going to go over now. So this formula, it works for pretty much any relationship problem that you're having. It's called, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically when you X, it makes me feel Y. Example would be when you don't do the dishes, it makes me feel upset. So how to use this in your situation? You could say, when you talk about loving chicken, it makes me feel upset because all I can think about is how the chickens were abused and it sucks. Something like that. Like you want to get across that you're feeling bad about it and not necessarily blame the other person, but they can't then tell you that your feelings aren't valid. So I think that's a great formula to use. Another example from my life would be, like I had a friend come to town, and he's someone I've known for 20 years, and he was talking about steak and whatnot, and we hadn't spent too much time together. Maybe I haven't even seen him since I gone vegan. So, he wasn't used to it. It was a change. And I said, hey man, like, it's great to see you. Since I'm vegan now, I don't really appreciate when people talk about eating animal products around me anymore. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. And then he did slip up a couple times. And another thing to remember is that to most people, this is a non-issue, so it can take some getting used to. It also depends like how close you are with these friends, how receptive they are to veganism. You can't do everything. But I think in general for you, Sri, I actually know Sri in person. You're a really likable, confident, charismatic guy. I think that if you set boundaries to people, that they will respect them. So I would say go with when you express so much excitement for animal products, it makes me feel bad. Whatever is true for the way that you're feeling now. Let me know how it goes. Should vegans refrain from using terms that could be seen as derogatory toward animals, e.g. kill two birds with one stone? Language is important. I don't necessarily place as much importance on language as a lot of people do, but I do recognize that it's important, especially when you're trying to change culture. So that's why you'll see Earthling Ed talk about a lot how you shouldn't call animals its, you should call them he, she, or they. This is something that I try to do. Obviously, I slip up a little bit when it comes to using phrases that are derogatory toward animals. Yes, I do think you should refrain from using them. You probably shouldn't say kill two birds with one stone. I think there are a bunch of them. Actually, at one point, I saw PETA did a list of like common animal phrases and what to say instead. I remember thinking that the things that they said to say instead were really stupid. So see if you can find that list, or I'll try to find a link in the description. I would say instead of killing two birds with one stone, since I'm a weirdo who likes talking about dead babies a lot, I would say, oh, you can kill two babies with one axe, or something like that, whatever is funny to you and true to you. But yes, do not talk about murdering animals. If we want to shift culture away from murdering animals, then we shouldn't be blasé about talking about it, even when we're just, speaking casually. Catherine Klein asked, and go check out her channel. She made a video about Neil deGrasse Tyson that was infuriating, but also very good. What is the most creative anti-vegan argument you've heard in your outreach? At a certain point when you've been doing outreach for a long time, you start to feel like you've heard all the excuses, but you would be wrong. There's so many times I hear completely random excuses that I've never heard. The most bizarre one, which I don't even know if this should count because I think the guy was like actually mentally insane, but he had worked at a dairy processing plant, I think where the milk goes to be pasteurized or bottled or whatever. And he said that there were no cows there. So since there were no cows there, milk doesn't actually come from cows and it's made in factories. I was like, okay, so milk doesn't come from cows. He said, it doesn't come from cows. They lie about it. They pretend it comes from cows, but it actually doesn't. And I asked him, what about meat? Does that come from animals? He said, no. Meat doesn't come from animals either. That's also made in factories. There wasn't much I could say to this besides like, okay, well, I've been to slaughterhouses. I've seen the animals. So like, what about that? He's like, oh, no, you haven't. It's all factories. What sign or opening line has led to the best conversations in your outreach? Great question. Very important question as well. The one that has led to the best conversations for me is the one that I stole from Justin of Debug Your Brain. It says, help me grow my YouTube, answer thought-provoking questions. Now, this is great because only people who want their thoughts to be provoked are going to come up. A lot of times I'll walk by people and they'll be like, oh, no, I don't want any thoughts to be provoked. Those aren't the type of people that you want to be talking to. It's also great because people don't know it's about veganism, so you can use any type of opening format that you want. By far, I think the most effective is to talk to people about power. Use that Spider-Man quote or another quote about abusing power. That seems to really cut through people's cognitive dissonance and show them that they are abusing power over animals. In terms of filming, I think the best one is the Give Me Your Best Arguments Against Veganism debate of vegan. And I use the word debate intentionally because I wanted someone who wasn't sold on veganism. I think it makes for better YouTube videos and that you can cover more ground, more arguments, because it's nice when someone kind of like agrees with what you say and you feel like you can make them go vegan. But at the end of the day, most people I talk to on the street are not going to go vegan. The people who are going to go vegan are the ones who see the video. And if they have that back and forth, I think it is more effective. Here's a question for you, Miss Fulton. Is the reason you so abruptly blocked my Facebook account shortly after accepting my friend request because you were fearful that I may have told you the truth about the leftist agenda that you obviously support? Silliest of my silly, sinful slaves. All right, guys, I think that's a good place to end this video. But if you want to see more questions, then join my Patreon. I'm going to do an extended version of this video for my Patreon where we will talk about antinatalism, wild animal suffering, and more. Peace.